Okay, open public hearing. I'm going to turn it over to our city planner, Jacob Gregson.
That guy over there.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
So this first public hearing tonight, 5:45, has to do with sale of real property. So there's a statute, ORS 221725, that's Oregon Revised Statutes, for those of you not hearing acronyms. When a city feels necessary to sell its property, we're supposed to have a public hearing on the matter to receive public input, if any. So I just have a brief presentation to explain what's going on to meet this requirement. So I only have 4 slides to illustrate the matter. This first one shows what most of us know historically as the Boise White Paper Site. It's been in the city for a century, so most people should be aware of it. Of course, now we're calling it the St. Helens Industrial Park, I believe. And so basically we're carving a parcel out of this. And so that's just highlights the overall property for people to get their bearings. Interestingly, this map, it's one I made for the city administrator looking at the legal description for a exclusion area. And back in 2000, there was a deal with between PGE and Columbia River Public or People's Utility District. Generally, everything in the city is under CURPUD, but they had an agreement that that first slide was an area that's exclusive to PGE. Not really related to this particular hearing, but an interesting thing that we get to deal with this property. So the second slide, which is up there now. So in order to sell this parcel, we need to do what's called a land partition. And what a land partition is, it's just when we take a piece of property and carve it into 2 or 3 parcels in a calendar year. So this is a 2-parcel partition. Parcel 1, highlighted in yellow, is the parent parcel. And if you compare that with the first slide, you would see that it's not the entire industrial park. Basically, it represents the area where the mill has infrastructure and improvements. The other parcels, especially closer to Old Portland Road, are left alone because they didn't need to be included. The parcel that's being carved off is in hatch marked there, identified as parcel 2. So that's the parcel in question to be sold. And we're supposed to talk about the agreement between the buyer and seller. And there are some things that need to be worked out and are close to being worked out. I'll go over those briefly. One is access. Now, if you notice there in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see this white line extending into the yellow. That is the Castor Road public right-of-way. And you'll see that parcel 2 does not abut this. And so since it's not along a public street, it needs to have access. And so our proposal is for it to be an access easement, which is shown there in the red dashed line. And that'll require a maintenance agreement. And then, it's kind of early in the development or redevelopment of this site. And so we wanted to make sure there was a clause in there that the seller or the city can relocate the street, but it would be at our cost. It's possible in the future, where that access is, it may make sense in a different place depending on what else happens. The access easement is also supposed to be a utility easement, so it's intended for utilities so as not to encumber other areas of the site to maximize the potential elsewhere. Water is dependent on the mill's infrastructure. The water line doesn't extend to that parcel. And so we need an agreement since it is dependent on what's technically considered private infrastructure. Sanitary sewer is similar. The sanitary sewer line is actually further away, closer to Old Portland Road. The mill has been kind of a strange animal in that it has a shared wastewater treatment facility with the city, with DEQ limitations. And so we need an agreement for that since there's not sewer to the site. Stormwater, the mill has stormwater requirements with DEQ, and there's infrastructure intertwined with the two parcels, so we need to have an agreement on that as well. There is a wetland. Well, you'll see some wetlands identified on there. One of those is actually on the site. These were wetlands inventoried in the 90s. If you were to go out there, you would think to yourself, is this a wetland? What I think happened is when our consultants back in the 90s were doing a broad brush inventory, they saw some water there, I think related to the mill operation. Keith, you probably know more about it.
Actually, there was a oil tank there, and so there was a big hole for the oil tank to sit into, and so yes, it was an indentation that water sat in.
Oh,
It's since been filled up, yeah.
I see. So it's, I don't think it's really a wetland in real world, but it is on our maps. So slide 3. Next slide, please. So in this case, we're kind of zooming in a little closer to show you the area in question. And, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for this and surrounding lands, and so we wanted to make sure we had an access way to get on the other side of the tracks. And so one of the things we did with this partition is to make sure that we had a swath of 50-foot wide land between. There's a fence line just to the right of that MI7 wetland, that blue splotch in the lower left-hand corner. And so we made sure there was a 50-foot swath of non-wetland area where that property line is going, so we can have access further to the south. We also made sure that there's a vehicle turnaround area at the railroad tracks, which is cut off from the screen just a little bit there. Just to explain what's going on here, you'll see 1, 2, 3 buildings identified. Those buildings will be located on this proposed parcel. And they've been working on getting those permitted for use, as well as OLCC permitting for marijuana production. One of the issues we ran into is Oregon law does not allow marijuana production on public land. The 50-year lease that was originally intended to solve that didn't work, so we had to do this partition. Another thing on this property that predominates the southern portion of it, and it's not really shown on there, but it's what's called the South 80 wetland, or excuse me, landfill. And this is a landfill that the mill had. It was closed in the 1980s. And there's a little bit of work that needs to be done with that, and that's captured in the agreement. So finally, the last slide is just an example of what the partition plat's going to look like. This is a draft, but ultimately this is on a Mylar. It goes to the county. It's recorded. Once it's recorded, all of a sudden you have a couple lots. The purchase price is just under $3.5 million. And then there are some other things to help the community. There's a community benefit fee, which is $2,000 per month for the first 60 months. So that's a total of $120,000 over a 2.5-year period for charities of the city's choosing. And so if there's any charities out there, this is your time to start getting the counselor's ear. And then there's another thing in there for Public Safety, Education, and Parks Fund. That's $1,000 per month per every 10,000 square feet of canopy while it's producing. There's a clause in there for increases based on inflation, and that is intended to be perpetual. Any questions or comments? And if you have comments, you should probably come up to the table. And if there's nothing, we can move on.
Okay.
Just want to, I'd like to just comment. I've kind of been pushing this project along and whatnot. As you know, we bought the paper mill a few years ago. It has been an animal of its own, trying to dissect it and make it productive for the city and whatnot. So This is a good fit to kind of get us a little bit of money so that we can dissect it and get it ready for other industries to come into town and whatnot. So that's these individuals have been very helpful with us and been partnered with us to kind of get this piece ready so that we can sell it off to other industries and whatnot. And their long-term plans are to use anywhere between 50 and 80 acres of the 200 acres. So, if that would come about, it could be anywhere from 400 to 500 jobs in the future. So, could be a good fit for us.
Any public comment? I'm sure most of you are here for the next one. Okay.
Okay, hearing none, this hearing's closed.